have probably heard the expression that life is not a dress rehearsal. It seems like just yesterday that I was a young man with the whole world in front of me. And now, looking back, I am unbelievably amazed at everything that has taken place since I was in my 20s. There have been a number of successes and probably an equal number of failures. I've gone through setbacks and I've experienced victory. I've been at my lowest and I've been on the mountaintop. When all is said and done, I hope that I can look back on my life and ultimately see that I made a difference. And I wanted to share this message today, I think particularly because it's graduation Sunday, as a way to inspire our graduates as they move forward in their lives, but also as an inspiration to each of us, that we can look back and really see that we made a difference. I want to be able to look back when everything is said and done and consider that I lived a life with absolutely no regrets. Life goes by pretty fast. You heard me say that to the kids. It's a flicker. Life is just a flicker. Making the most of our life means being intentional about how we live it. And that's going to be the theme of the next two messages that I'm going to share with you. And as I thought about this message, that life goes by pretty fast, and I began to prepare it, my mind instantly went to a movie quote that some of you might remember.
Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you can miss it.
Where's that from? Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Almost everybody remembers that crazy movie. Life does move at you pretty fast, and if you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. That famous line of Ferris Bueller, if you know the premise of the movie, Ferris Bueller took advantage of what he saw was the perfect day, and it was the perfect opportunity to make the most of the day that he had. Here's how most of us spend our days. I found this pretty interesting. The average adult spends 33 hours a week watching TV. Now, you could be more than that or less than that, but that's the average. We spend an average of 23 hours a week online. Now, I'm not saying all that to be critical. I'm just saying that 56 hours out of our week is wiped out by those two things alone. Now, I'm sure some of that was productive time, but not all of it was productive time. Most people don't intend to waste their life. They just get distracted. We just get pulled off onto other things, and we don't realize how much time we spend doing it, or how much it's taking us away from other things that are important. And those things that are distracting us aren't necessarily bad things. Sometimes we get distracted by good things. But it's in the getting distracted by good things that we often miss out on the great things. And so I want to share a concept with you today as a foundation for what we're going to learn. God made you on purpose to make a difference. Another way of saying it is God made you on purpose for a purpose. Psalm 139 says we are fearfully and wonderfully made. You were made on purpose. You were made specifically to be who you are. God didn't make you to be just like somebody else. God made you to be who you are. One of the driving forces of my life has always been that I believe that I was put here for a purpose. And for a lot of years, I didn't know what that purpose was. I just believed, growing up just as a little kid, I always heard the story about how I was born and all that kind of stuff. And you've heard, some of you heard me say it before, I was a premature baby and they thought I was going to die. And my grandmother, who was a great Pentecostal woman, she's one of those ladies who had her little hankies tucked in her blouse. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? And she had a little hanky, and you know what that was there for, right? Because she get blessed. Ooh, thank you, Jesus. She put it right back, right? And she had that handkerchief anointed and sent to the hospital and put on me as a 2.5-pound premature baby. And I lived. And I believe God had a purpose for my life. I don't believe that was an accident. And even though I spent a lot of years not following Christ, I knew I was alive for a reason. I believed it had a purpose. And so when I gave my life to Christ, I finally found out that that purpose was to make a difference in the lives of others for Jesus Christ. I didn't know what that was going to look like, Arnold. I had no idea I was ever going to be in the ministry. I just believed when I gave my life to Christ that now I found my purpose. And God knew you before you were even born. God knew you. You were not an accident. You were not a mistake. God knew you. God planned you before you were even born. God made you on purpose for a purpose. So let me introduce our message with this text found in Matthew. It's a text that's used for our lives. It's one of those texts you can take a lot of different ways, but I want to use it as a foundation for what we're doing today. Beginning in verse 14, it says, "Again, it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money." In the context here, Jesus is talking about the coming kingdom and being prepared for it. And he does so by giving, in Matthew 25, giving us 3 different parables. The first parable is the parable of the 10 virgins, and 5 were wise and 5 were foolish. And you can kind of read into that parable about being prepared for the coming kingdom and being ready. And then we have this parable about the talents or the bags of gold. And then he closes out the chapter with the parable of the sheep and the goats. And in each parable, each man was given something. All of us in this room are blessed people. We'd have to admit that. You may have some difficult circumstances going in your life, but I think each of us could still look at our lives and say that we are blessed people. God has given to us. God has provided for us. Each of us also has spiritual gifts. Some may have more than others. But I believe each of us has a spiritual gift that was given to us specifically by God. And we're supposed to use those gifts as good stewards for the Master. And so this morning, I'm not going to keep you a long time today, but in the few minutes that I have, I'm going to give you 5 questions that you need to ask yourself that will help you determine what you're put on earth to do. And again, I just thought this was so appropriate. And some of you know, it's like I plan 6 months of sermons at a time. I look down, I set aside some time, and I get real focused, and I'm going to be doing that while I'm at annual conference. That's what I do in the evening when I'm not in conference meetings. I'm sitting planning sermons. So I'll be doing the second half of the year at annual conference. But I sat down back in November of last year and planned all these messages for you, not knowing why God laid them on my heart, not knowing specifically what intent they were going to have. Not knowing that even as I planned this today, that today would be graduation Sunday, and this would be such an instrumental message for those graduates to realize God put you here for a purpose. Not knowing that we would be in a situation as a church where we needed new people to step forward and say, count me in. We need new volunteers. Not knowing what lay in store, but you know who did know? God knew. And God laid this message in my heart way back then. And so I want to give you these 5 questions. They're going to help you focus on what your purpose is. Question number 1 is this: what do I enjoy? What do I enjoy? And I've said often that if God's people don't have a right to be happy, nobody has a right to be happy. I mean, we possess the blessed hope of Christ. If anybody should be filled with joy and excitement, it ought to be us. I've actually had people tell me, say, you need to stop being so excited. Can you imagine that? Yeah. can you just tone it down just a notch? You're just a little too excited. You know, maybe cut back on the caffeine a little bit. I'm excited because I've got Christ. I've got the blessed hope of my life. I was told by a psychologist one time that I lived in a Pollyanna world. He said, you're just too Pollyanna. You're not realistic. No one can be that happy. And I thought about that for a minute. I thought, if I have a choice of being happy or sad, I prefer happy. If I get a choice, and I got a choice, I prefer happy. We should be filled with joy, especially if we trust Christ. But so often we look just the opposite. Sometimes some Christian people are just the sourest looking people. We don't look like we're happy about nothing. We come to church on Sunday morning, we ought to be getting filled and infused with excitement and joy and hope. And we go out, we leave church and we go out to eat. And we have the pastor for dinner, only he ain't there. Some of you got that? That was the longest sermon I ever heard. And we gripe, and we complain, and we grumble, and those servers at the restaurant, they got to wait on us, and you know how much they love Sunday? Any of you ever worked restaurant industry? Did you like working Sundays? No. Why? You usually didn't get tipped very well, number one. And you had to deal with complaining church people. We ought to be blessed and joyful and excited and thrilled. And we can't understand why our kids don't want to go to church. Well, we don't act like we want to go. What do you enjoy? God's people should be happy people. Should be excited people. Here's what Jesus said about having joy and living the abundant life. He says in John 10:10, the thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. That's what the thief does. He comes to make your life miserable. But Jesus says, I have come that they may have life. And that they may have it more abundantly. Well, you ought to have an abundance of life. Your whole life should be just filled over the brim with joy. He says in John 15:11, these things I've spoken to you that my joy may remain in you and that your joy may be full. So don't walk around looking like you've been baptized in pickle juice. Be happy. Be excited. Be joyful. Let Christ radiate from your body. Let people see you and say, I want what they're having. Be joyful. The best witness to unsaved people are people filled with joy. When people look at you and say, I want to live their life. I remember that growing up as a kid. I had seen a lot of people who said they were Christians, and I looked at their life and they didn't look happy. So if that's what being a Christian meant, I didn't want any part of that. But I had an aunt and an uncle. They radiated joy. There wasn't a time in my life that I remember ever seeing them that they weren't filled with joy. Even in the bad times, they praised God. And I looked at all the other church people that I knew and I thought, man, if that's what it's all about, I don't want that. But my Uncle Babe and Aunt Imogene, I want what they got. I want what they got. That made a difference to me. That made an impression. It took a lot of years before it made me make a change. But when I gave my life to Christ, the very first people I wanted to tell was my uncle and my aunt. Because I wanted what they had. What do you enjoy? When you get connected to God's purpose for your life, it's going to be something you enjoy. See, a lot of us, we think, well, if I yield my life to God and I surrender to God, He's going to send me to Africa and put someplace as a missionary. Jesus said, I came that your joy may be full. He wants you to enjoy life. He wants you to have a joyful experience. So God's not going to call you into something you're not going to be happy with. And some of you may be serving Christ, but you're not serving with joy. Well, maybe you're not serving in the right place. doing the right thing, doing the right job. Maybe God's calling you to something else. God wants you to be a joyful person, so it stands to reason that when you are fulfilling His purpose for your life, you are going to find it to be a joyful experience. And some of you who have served God for many, many years, you know what I'm talking about. You know it's great joy when you're working with those children. You know it's great joy when you're serving the poor and the impoverished. You know it's great joy when you're out serving Habitat for Humanity or doing a mission project to help somebody who's in substandard housing. You find it great joy to evangelize and share the Word of God. You find it great joy to go out and volunteer and help out in the Glow Festival. You find joy in that because you're fulfilling God's purpose for your life. It resonates. And I've used this illustration before. You can take a guitar that's in perfect tune, and you can go over and hit that A note on the piano or that organ, and it'll make that A chord on that guitar vibrate. Don't you have to touch it. And you know why? Because they resonate together. They're together. And when you match up your purpose with your gifts, you're going to be doing what you enjoy. And it's going to resonate. It's going to be in harmony together. Question number 2. What do I do well? Because you may like to do something, and you're lousy at it. There's lots of stuff I like to do. I'm not any good at it. I have to leave that to other people. But what do you do well? You could be here today and you don't think you do anything well. But I already told you, the Bible says that you were fearfully and wonderfully made. God don't make no junk. God made you on purpose, for a purpose. And so let me give you an example of something that demonstrates that. Some of you here might be very detail-oriented. Maybe even to the point of obsessive-compulsive disorder. And you might be thinking that's not a very good thing. But to someone like me that bounces all over the place, we need you in our life. That's why I value my wife's obsessive detail attitude so much. I need her in my life. I mean, she just has an ability that to some people would say, man, that drives me up the wall. I love it because I know where I'm weak. I know what I don't do well, and I don't do detail very well. I mean, you almost feel like someone needs to have a chair and a whip, to make me do it because I just don't do detail very well. Joyce, is able to come into my office and set all my filing up, color code it all, organize it, make lists of things for me to do, all to keep me on track. Now, does that drive me up the wall sometimes? Yeah. The reason is because I still don't like to do it. But it helps me do it. Okay? It's being detailed and kind of orderly. I don't do that. Joyce does it very well. It's not a sickness. It's a gift. It's a gift to me. And maybe you think, I just can't do anything well. Maybe some of the things you don't think you do well, we need absolutely perfectly right here. Everyone does something well, even if we don't see it all the time. Some of you have the gift of caring. I mean, you can see someone crying, and you just start crying yourself. I mean, that's just how you're like, you don't even know what they're crying about. It's like, oh, and you just want to go and give them a hug. And you have that gift of being able to go and care for somebody, that gift of empathy. God has blessed you with a sense of knowing when people are hurting and they need that. You're gifted with that. That's not something bad. You might be thinking just like, I'm just a big crybaby. Hey, that's a gift. There's a place for that. Some of you have the gift of imagination. You're idea people. You're just idea factories. I have a lot of ideas, but that doesn't mean I'm necessarily good at pulling them off. But I got a lot of great ideas. That's why I need all your all's help. And maybe you're at one of those creatives. You're a gifted person with just tremendous imagination. And there's a great place for that. Peter said, each of you should use whatever gift you've received to serve others. Did you get that? It's not just for you. Use whatever gift you receive to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace. Your gift is a gift of grace as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. God, by His wonderful grace, has blessed you with gifts to use to serve others. That's why it was given to you. It wasn't given to you to waste. It wasn't given to you to squander. It wasn't given to you to bury in a can in the backyard. God gave you gifts to use. And that verse says that every person that claims the name of Christ should use their spiritual gifts to serve the world through the local church. As we do our best as a church to love God, love people, and reach the world for Christ, how are you using your gifts that God has given you? That gift of grace was given to you to fulfill His purpose in your life. I spoke about how we're to live in God's grace last week. And so you need to seriously and prayerfully ask yourself those two questions. What do I enjoy? What do I do well? And you have to ask those two before you can ask the next question. What bothers me? What bothers me? Now, what I mean by that question, I'm not talking about those little nitpicky things like, people that don't use their turn signal. Or how about that trend of men wearing suits with shorts? You see that? And that's the dumbest thing you've ever seen. You just see me up here wearing a suit and a tie with shorts? I'm not talking about that, though. I'm talking about those things that break your heart. What bothers you? What is it that deep down disturbs you to the core as an injustice and a wrong? What is it that you can't stand anymore? Anybody here remember Popeye? Some of us are old enough to remember Popeye. You remember what Popeye said? He said, I've had all I can stand, and I can't stand no more. Some of you remember Popeye. All you Jeeps should remember Popeye. That's where it came from. As a follower of Jesus Christ, there should be a thing that you see in our world that makes you feel that way. I've taken all I can stand, I can't stand no more. Jesus wasn't a pacifist. Just read how He went into the temple and turned all the money changers' tables upside down. There should be some things that drive you to righteous indignation. There should be things that you get so uncomfortable about that you want to make a difference. That you can't sit still and take it any longer. That you can't sit back and do nothing. When I teach our district churches on how to find their one excellent mission, I tell them that they're going to find that one excellent mission when they basically find this thing that makes them shed a tear, dig deep in their pockets and pull out money, or put up their dukes and fight for it. When you find your misery, you find your ministry. When you find that thing that hurts you so much inside that you have to do something about it, you will find your ministry. What bothers you? How much more can you take before you say, somebody's got to do something about that, and that somebody is me? One of the greatest books in the Old Testament is the book of Nehemiah. And give you a little backdrop to the verse I'm going to share with you. Nehemiah is in exile from Israel. They have been in captivity now for about 150 years. And his brothers come back from Jerusalem, and he asks them what's going on in Jerusalem, how are things going. And they tell them basically that Jerusalem's in ruins. Those that were still left behind, they're in a terrible state. And it says there in chapter 1, verse 4, it says, when I heard these things, when Nehemiah heard that Jerusalem was in ruins, and he hadn't even been there, but he knew it was his homeland. When he heard that, he says, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. And you can go on and read that story about how Nehemiah went back and he got the people together and they rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem. And then we got that famous verse where the people had a mind to work. But it says Nehemiah wept and mourned and fasted and prayed. Deep down in his soul, Nehemiah knew somebody had to do something about the condition of Jerusalem. And that somebody was him. As we look out at our community, what is it that bothers you? Are you just numb to the plight of people and issues that are in our little valley? As you see children struggling, as you see them with not enough to eat and not enough clothes to wear, as you see them struggling in situations and circumstances of abuse, does that bother you? Does that rile anybody else up in this room but me? How does that affect you? As you see homes being broken apart, single-parent households, homes torn apart by addiction. Last weekend, there were tons throughout our region of overdoses because of heroin. Does that bother you? Can one person make a difference? Can one person that's bothered about something possibly make a difference? Consider Mother Teresa, who went to Calcutta and saw the conditions of the children and the lepers there, and decided that bothered her so much she needed to go there and make a difference. There's a story told where at one time she was washing and bathing a leper that was there and kind of cleaning them up, and a tourist came by and had wanted to spend time and see her, and a tourist came by and this couple was there, and the lady says to her husband, she says, I wouldn't do that for $1 million. And she heard that, and she looked up, and she said, neither would I. What bothers you? What just gets under your skin? You say, I just can't stand it anymore. Did Mother Teresa make a difference? Yes or no? Yes or no? So can one person bothered about something bad enough make a difference? Yes or no? When you get bothered by something to the point it becomes a moral imperative, then you're going to get off your butt and you're going to do something to make a difference. When you find your misery, you will find your ministry. When you do that, you just might have to get your hands dirty. It's doing the hard work that I spoke about a few weeks ago. What breaks your heart that also breaks the heart of God? What bothers you? Question number 4. What opportunities are in front of me right now? And I want you to get this. If we aren't faithful with what's now, we never get to what's next. Does that make sense? If we're not faithful with what's now, we never get to what's next. What opportunities are in front of you right now to serve God? Many years ago, as a punk 22-year-old preacher, I was just pretty much preaching as an evangelist, going out of my home church and preaching at youth revivals and youth nights and that kind of thing. And now you got to trust me on this, that at 22, I was not a polished preacher by any means. I was just 22. But I was an excited preacher at 22. I'm not even sure if my messages ever had a point. I was just excited about Jesus, and I let my sermon pretty much be that. Every message. Just be excited about Jesus. You just might touch somebody. I had absolutely no plans. Trust me. No plans. Ever to be a pastor in a church. It was nice just going to different places, preaching whatever God laid on your heart. And you know, the great thing about preaching at other places is you can be brutally honest in your sermons because you don't have to face those people next Sunday. You're sort of like God's gunslinger. I mean, you just go in, guns blazing, preaching hellfire and brimstone, and you let the pastor clean it up next week, including the collateral damage where you might hit a saint or two. I'm just out here trying to shoot sinners, but you know, you might get maimed a little bit. My dream was that I was going to be some big-time evangelist, that I was going to be able to travel around and doing revivals everywhere. It was never, ever my intention to be a pastor. Because from what I could tell, pastors had to deal with all the people problems, board meetings, finances, and all that stuff I didn't like. Being an evangelist was pretty much a cool way to share the gospel without having a whole lot of responsibility. I was just cruising along, minding my own spiritual business, when all of a sudden I got a call from our superintendent asking me if I could please fill in for a little small church in Ironton till they could find them a new pastor. Just a couple weeks, 4 tops. 6 months later, they finally found a pastor for that little church. And I'd like to tell you that that 6-month tour of duty was easy, but it wasn't. But boy, did I learn some lessons. That was a church had about 12 to 14 people in it, most of them from the same family. Literally, mom, dad, and all their kids, and their wives, and their kids. I mean, that was it. That's the church that they sent me to that I've told the story sometimes that I went and only one person showed up. So I preached to him. Told him next week you might want to get a few more of the family members out. What I will tell you about that situation is that God used that opportunity to conform me into what He wanted, not what I wanted. God used that opportunity to make me a pastor. Some 35 years later, you all are the benefactors of God's directing me to do just that. Because I was willing to serve in the opportunity that was right in front of me. It is amazing how God will present little opportunities for us to serve others. And from that we find out our spiritual gifts and ultimately find out what God's will is for our lives. Never underestimate these little opportunities that God places in front of you. Your involvement in your local church is the way that you take advantage of opportunities that are available to you right now. And we have a number of activities coming up this summer and need people that are willing to say, Lord, I will do whatever you need me to do. You're not going to feel qualified enough. You're not going to feel like you have all the preparation that you need. But God is calling you nonetheless. Trust that God is going to show up and show off in your life as you begin to serve Him, reaching children, helping families throughout our valley. And can I say this just real quick? to all of our volunteers we already have, to all of you folks that you help out in our children's ministry, you help out whenever we have a food event, you help out when there's been a funeral and we need to put meals together, you help out in preparing music, you just give and give and give of yourself. Can I just tell you, thank you. Thank you so much. I want to thank you for being the person that stands in the gap week after week, serving in the opportunity that's right in front of you right now. Trust me when I tell you, we are raising up a generation of kids. They're going to be great Christian adults. You're going to blink, and they're going to be Abby. You're going to blink, and they're Adam or Josh. People moving from being an adolescent to being a great adult, making a difference in the world, inspired and with the foundation of Jesus Christ. Trust me that what you do today, whether it's in children's church, or Sunday school, or Glow Family Festival, or whatever it is you do to work with our kids' ministries, you're making a difference. You're changing the world, one little life at a time. Question 5, and I'll close. I thought it was going to be quick today, but I guess I wandered. Joyce is probably following along with my notes going like, I have no idea where he's going. I got no idea. Question 5, who? Who? First 4 questions, what do I enjoy, what do I do well, what bothers me, and what opportunities are in front of me right now? They don't mean much if you don't answer question 5. Who am I going to live for? Let me read you the rest of the story in our text today. In verse 19 it says, after a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrust me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrust me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew you were a hard man, harvesting where you've not sown and gathering where you've not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. Notice how many times the word master is used. 8 times in that text. The servant that was afraid to venture gained nothing and lost the blessing the master gave. He wasted his opportunity because he didn't understand who it was he was serving. He was more concerned about himself than the master because he says, I was afraid. All 3 men declared the man to be the master, but only 2 demonstrated that he was. As believers this morning, we may declare Christ as master, but do we act like he is? Are we wasting our time and talents and gifts for our own selfish motives, or are we passionately using them for the master? There will come a day when all of us will stand before God, and he's going to ask, what'd you do with everything I gave you? Every gift, every talent, every ability, every bit of time. How'd you use it for me? And we'll have to answer for that. Who are you going to live for? And you might be thinking to yourself this morning, hey, I'm just an average, ordinary person. I don't really matter. What could I possibly do to make a difference for God? You can make a difference because the Spirit of the living God lives in you. You can make a difference because greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world. You can make a difference because we are more than conquerors through Christ that loves us. God uses average, ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And you got to trust me on this. If he can use a mess like me, he can change the world with people like you. Let me pray for us.